But just an interesting little thought. Somebody just asked me, where did the Elmes family come from? And it was the same question I used to ask my father. And he didn't know much. I grew up in Cork, and we originally came from some part of Wexford, but didn't know what or where. And the only thing my father could tell me, and I hesitate saying this, but we came over with a dreadful fellow called Cromwell in 1642 with a Bishop Ram. And that's the only thing my father knew about where we came from. Anyway, move on. We had a builder's merchant business in Waterford and New Ross, which was owned by my family and two families. And in 1971, we sold out to a famous guy called Tony O'Reilly, who was taking over companies left, right, and centre. Hawkins in Cork was something similar to ours, and it's been sold out to Brooks Thomas in Dublin. And it looked like the writing was on the wall. So in 1971, we sold out to the Fitzwilton Group, which was Tony O'Reilly. Within a week, my father died. And with the new regime, they said the first thing to do, we want to clear out all the old rubbish. So they suggested we take the old boardroom table out of the boardroom, and they were putting in a chipboard replacement, a veneer chipboard replacement. But in the process of lifting out the desk out of the boardroom, the top came off the desk, and I discovered that it had been my grandfather's desk. And he had died in 1948 when I was 3. So obviously I never remember talking to him. But amongst the things I found on the desk was a school exercise page, like an old Ecker, fading blue line, written in shaky pencil. It was the Elmes family. And there were three pages which said the history of the Elmes family from 1642 to 1942. And the guy who came in 1642 was a Robert Samuel Elmes. My grandfather was the same name, 300 years later. So, funnily enough, on the back, the 4th page, this family tree going from 1642 up to 1942. Couldn't believe it. Went home. Fascinating meeting this thing that I'd never seen before. Went up to bed. Read the thing in bed. And fell asleep. Sorry. Following morning, I woke up. And I went off for work. And when I came home, I discovered the Kiwi woman had found a scrap of paper and burned it. Sorry. Anyway, we'll forget that now and move on. But that was interesting. I knew nothing about it. And since I've been able to get back to 1798, and there's some fantastic history about 1798. There was a group of letters called the Elmes Letters, which were discovered in 1798 about the 1798 rebellion. And they're now in the National Archives, or copies of them are in the National Archives. And I read through them, and they're fascinating, giving the side of what actually happened. And the Elmes family, we didn't get any land. We were tenant farmers for the Coughlins in Tintern Abbey. So we were tenant farmers for them. And in 1798, because they were Church of Ireland, the place was burnt down and the cattle were all killed. But that was part and parcel of what that went on at the time back then. And I'm going to mention some other fascinating thing about the family tree. So whoever had written the family history in the 1940s had written in pencil But on the family tree, anybody who married a Catholic was rubbed out. So, which was extraordinary. So if they got to me, I would have been rubbed out as well. But I'm very happy to say, when I got married, we were blessed with 4 children, 2 Protestants and 2 Catholics. They went to both churches, 2 boys and 2 girls. And one of them was in England a few years ago and went to a church, and the priest saw her red hair and said, "Where are you from?" Which said, "I'm from Ireland." So of course, the first question to Claire was, "Are you a Protestant or a Catholic?" And Claire said, "I'm the best of both." So we'll come on to Mary Elmes. How I'm related to her is Mary's father and my grandfather were brothers. So Mary would have been my father's first cousin, which makes me our first cousin once removed by one generation. My children are twice removed, and my grandchildren 3 times removed. So that's how this woman came about. Now, I knew she existed, but I never met a woman in my life. I grew up in Tramore, as I said, and her brother, one brother, John, and John used to come to Tramore for weddings and funerals and get-togethers every now and again. But Mary had gone off to Spain in 1937 and never really came back. So that was one reason. And peculiarly enough, nobody ever really talked to her. She got off, she married a Frenchman, but nobody had known what she had done. And it was, even her family, her son and her daughter, knew nothing of what she'd done during the war. She didn't speak about it. Now, where I can relate to that is growing up in Tramore as a young fellow. I was, I suppose, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, only 10 years after the Second World War ended. I was fascinated by the Japs and the Japs and the Nazis and the swastikas and all that. And I used to ask my parents, would you ever ask somebody what they did during the war? And I remember in Tramore there were 3 people. There was Dr. O'Donnell, there was a Major Denny, and I can't remember the third guy's name. And I used to say to my parents, would you ever ask them what they did? And whenever they asked them, would never talk about it. They just, the memory of it was so horrific. They just didn't ever. And Mary, I think, was exactly the same. She never spoke about it. So this was discovered by chance, I suppose. Mary died in 2002. And a couple of years later, a lady called Ellis, who was a nurse, wrote in a book about love and war in the Pyrenees, and in that she mentioned Mary Elmes on a couple of occasions. And then there was another lady who picked it up called Rosemary Bailey, and she wrote another book. And that was picked up by a guy called Bernard Wilson. And Bernard Wilson was a lecturer in London, and he had been for a house of 20 years in the Pyrenees, and anything he read about the war and the Pyrenees in particular, he was fascinated. So he picked this book up and he made inquiries of who this Mary Elmes was, who was a Quaker and an Irish nurse, according to the book. So he got on to the Society of Friends in Ireland and said, could you tell me about Mary Elmes? And I said, who? Never heard of her. So she wasn't a member of the Society of Friends. And they went to the Irish Nursing Organisation. Can you tell me who Mary Elmes was? Never heard of her, she wasn't a nurse either. So I'll just run through some slides here, and it'll explain the story as I go on, and if anybody wants to ask me any questions. So what happened was, shortly after that, a guy called Paddy Butler, an Irish journalist who was a freelance journalist originally with the Irish Press, and was the Paris correspondent for the Irish Press, and spent some time in the Pyrenees. He also discovered it. And in 2013, on the anniversary of the Holocaust, he wrote an article in the Irish Times. It was the first time anybody in Ireland had known anything about Mary Elmes or her involvement during the war. And it picked it up from there. So Bernard Wilson spent the next 10 years researching Mary Elmes. He happened to be a Quaker, and he didn't know the Quakers had anything to do with the First World War or the Spanish Civil War, and he was quite fascinated by that. So he later found out that the Quakers were a huge relief organisation during both wars. They were pacifists, they didn't believe in war, but they helped, and they would help both sides. But if one side found out the Quakers were helping, the other would accept help from them. That's how stupid it was. But anyway, that's where it started. So I just run on with this. In 2014, a company called Network Ireland, which is a ladies' business organisation for the 32 counties in Ireland, had their national president was a lady called Deirdre Waldron, and she was president of Network Ireland, and she works for a company called Fusion on the South Map. And they have an annual award to celebrate some Irish woman who was outstanding. And it's in memory of a former member of their organisation called the Trish Murphy Award. So in 2014, she nominated Mary Elmes as the most outstanding Irish person. And with that, she brought Bernard Wilson over to Ireland to talk, and she brought Paddy Butler and Coda Finn, who had written a book as well, all to Cork. And that was the first time I had met any of them. And during the course of the evening, with so many things going on, poor old Bernard Wilson, who'd never been to Ireland in his life, and long after his normal bedtime, about 11:30, he was told, "You about 5 minutes to tell us about Mary Elmes." He said, "How would I fit in 5 minutes about Mary Elmes after 10 years of research?" So anyway, he said his bit, and I said, "I'll get you back next year." So the following year he came back, and he came to the Cork Literary and Scientific Society and gave an excellent talk there on the opening of the 2017 year. So he has passed what he gave on to me, and that's what I'm going to show you now. So this is the start of it. As I said, this was the news about Mary Elmes was released in the Irish Times by Paddy Butler. And 2 years later, he was in a position to contact Yad Vashem with a view to having Mary recognised as the righteous among nations. And what that was, that is Israel's highest honour to anybody who rescued Jews who was a non-Jew during the Second World War. So Oskar Schindler was obviously one of those, and there are thousands of others. But subsequently Mary got nominated a few years ago and became righteous among nations, and she's the only Irish person to receive such an award. People may have noticed this on the South Map, which is the first little notice that was put up about her. And this is the list of righteous among nations, the Holocaust, and also the Holocaust Museum in France. And we see Mary Elmes' name from Perpignan in that. Then the first book that was brought out was Paddy Butler's book, which was the extraordinary story of Mary Elmes. Paddy's book is dedicated to Bernard Wilson, who was very helpful and gave him all the information he could possibly give them. And that book is dedicated. So that was the first book that came out. And she was known as Mary Elizabeth Jean Elmes. And the Mary, when she later went to Europe, people couldn't get their head around that, so it became Mary. So that's how she changed, her name became Mary. And she was born on the 5th of May 2000 in Coolgrainia and Blackrock Road in Ballinchapel. And there's a lady called Jacinta Ryan. She's an artist now living in that house, and she was born in the same room as Mary Elmes was born in that house. And her mother and father, Dr. Ryan, was a lecturer in UCC, and he bought the house from Mary Elmes' mother. What their business was Waters. I'm sure everybody remembers Waters of Winter Street. It was interesting. Waters there is glass and lead, but also dispensing chemistry. And my granduncle, Edward Elmes, who was my grandfather's brother, came to Cork in around 1901, because he's in the 1901 census on Pope's Quay in a flat. The 1911 census, he's now married, obviously, and Mary was 2 years old in 1911. But he was a chemist, and he married Elizabeth Waters, who was the boss's daughter. So he did a handy job by marrying the boss's daughter. And that's her, somewhere in Cork, people have various opinions, where it could be Rocky Bay or somewhere like that. I'm not quite sure. And she went to school in Rochelle. And that's what Rochelle must have looked like around the time. And it was a very progressive school. And she did well, and from there she went on to Trinity College. And she studied, that's Trinity as it is today, and she studied from 1928 to 1932 in Trinity. And she obtained a first in Spanish and French, and she won a gold medal. This is a group, and it's, there weren't many ladies or women in Trinity at the time. This is a great photograph showing all women were all graduates of Trinity. And there's Mary on the bottom left. From there, she went to the London School of Economics. She got a scholarship to go from Trinity, and she studied there, and she was studying international relations, and that was her interest. But she was still very keen, having got gold in both Spanish and French. She travelled to both countries, and she joined an international organisation in London, Chatham House, which was again to help people in international relations. And she became friendly with one of the people working in Chatham House, who was a lady Young, Sir George Young. Her husband was a Spanish diplomat. Well, spent a lot of time in Spain in particular. And when the Spanish War broke out, there had been a couple of Spanish children working with Lady Young, and they were terrified what was happening back in Spain, so they wanted to go back. So Lady Young asked Mary Elmes would she come with them to bring the children back, because she spoke fluent Spanish, which would have been a help. And Mary set off, and she went. She travelled to Gibraltar, and that was the ship that she travelled on. And when she was there, she got a 5-day pass. And the 5-day pass was just to be in Spain, hopefully to see the children set up wherever they were. But when they arrived there, she said, "What can I do to help?" So Sir George Young had set up an ambulance corps on the back of the ambulance to help during the Civil War, because Malaga was being bombed and there were horrific scenes going on. Now, it was interesting, in Ireland, there were people who fought on both sides of the Spanish Civil War, which many people don't realise. But they were the nationalists, and Franco was attacking where they were. So that was where Sir George Young spent quite a lot of time in a large house there. And he said, "How can I help?"
And the funny thing, well, it wasn't funny, most of the men were off fighting, so it was women and children and elderly people who were left behind. And a lot of them ended up, there were a lot of orphans. So he set up his ambulance unit, and Mary was going to help out with those. And this is from Malaga to Almeria, which is a description of a book about the horrors of that, and people fleeing. Now, nothing has changed. If you look at Syria today, Aleppo and places like that, it is exactly the same. And this was the dreadful conditions. And remember the young girl running from Napan in Vietnam. This is a similar picture, not quite so horrific, but what they were doing. And they're just fleeing. And here's Mary Elmes at a feeding station. So that's her in the middle of a feeding station. And Almeria, this is the state of the bombing. Now, there are bombers coming in from Italy and from Germany, as well as the Spanish, so there's unbelievable carnage. And this is one of the little boys that Mary rescued, and he was only aged 21 months. And they set up children's hospitals, and they got children's hospitals outside the towns in big houses where people had left, and they volunteered, well, if you want to put children in, set up a temporary hospital. So Tato was one of the orphans, and Mary nearly wanted to adopt him, but was never let. And there are many stories from these times. There's a guy called Pepe. He was 12-year-old, and he looks well enough, and he made a card on New Year's Day for Mary. And the envelope is still in the family's possession. That's the card he made. And he presented it to Mary on New Year's Day in 1939. Mary didn't keep a diary, just books of pictures. The last picture of Pepe with the note, he died on the 11th of January 1939. The English were in white with little coffins made out of powdered milk boxes. We see Tato a year or two later, the war was over, Mary had to leave him behind and go home, but adoption proved impossible, and she never knew what happened to the little boy. So while Mary was still in Spain at the hospital, there was a great exodus underway, and 500,000 people fled over the border in February 1939 over the Pyrenees to escape the force of Franco. The conditions were horrific. You can see there the snow, and they had no food, no nothing. They were fleeing, and it was cold. They were retiring or trying to get out of Spain as fast as they could, and conditions were just unbelievable. So what happened when they came over the border into France? Now, France, it was like a place like Perpignan area is, I suppose, a little bit like Munster, but there was very few people in that particular area, just over the border, and they know where to put them. So what did they do? Put them onto beaches and put them in behind barbed wire. And the conditions there were just unbelievable. It was either, in the winter, it was freezing cold, and they had to dig holes in the sand to try and get some shelter. There was no food, nothing. And that was just trying to settle in. It was just dreadful. So something needed to be done. So Mary, at this stage, had crossed over into Perpignan, and she was working with the Quakers organisation, because Sir George Young had run out of money. He spent all his money trying to help and run his ambulance corps, and when the money went, he went to the English Quakers and asked them to help. And when they ran out of money, they went to the American Quakers. So the American Society Friends Committee were based in Marseille, and they did a huge amount to rescue people or to save people or provide means, and they could do it because they were pacifists, as I said, and they didn't take sides in the war. So they were able to provide things. Now, what Mary found was all these, the children upset the most because they were sitting there all day, nothing to do, nobody to teach them, nothing to eat, nothing to play, filthy, dirty place with rats and things like that, and anything to give them some sanity. So she got food and drawing things, and she could get musical instruments. She went to all sorts of ends, getting to make shoes because the ground was very rough. People needed something to do. She bought books, art materials, and musical instruments. In gratitude of her Spanish friends who were overwhelmed, they showed the only way they could by simply homemade gifts. And here is a card from another camp further along the coast. She treasured these little gifts, beautifully made out of any materials which came to hand, with the simplest tools she provided. And that is still in the family today. And there's a little anvil they made as well. Now, there was this guy, Augusti Bartra, was a Catalonian poet, and the Spain's culture, the elite, he would have looked like this, and Mary did not send me a dictionary, she did far more. He was looking for an English-Spanish dictionary and couldn't get them. The dictionary which travelled to me by exit was an example of it. So Mary gave her own dictionary to him, but she couldn't get one, and he never forgot that. She also met and helped artists. One such artist was a guy called Balino Garcia, and he showed his gratitude by painting this picture of Mary. And again, that's still in the family possession. Here's another great friend of hers, and everybody recognise him. He's Pablo Casal. And Casal was already in France, having sought refuge sometime earlier, and he was appalled by the conditions on the beaches. And he wrote, "Each time I dread going because of the suffering I would see. Afterwards I could not sleep at night, but I knew how the inmates longed to see and talk to fellow countrymen from outside. I started corresponding with many of the refugees and would spend hours each day writing letters and cards, seeking somehow to relieve their suffering by sending them funds and giving them words of encouragement." To Mary, with my profound thanks, that was a picture he sent which he signed. He and Mary became great friends, helping each other to bring comfort to those on the beaches. And that card is treasured by the family. This is a photograph of Mary and in her office in Perpignan. War broke out in September 1939, and the south of France was flooded with more refugees from Belgium, Holland, as well as those fleeing Nazism from Germany and further east. And this area suffered severe famine. She was about to enter into an amazing period of organising ability. Just to skip that, how Mary organised herself in Spain, and things were discovering more and more about her. But the Spanish doctors had been taught one way of medicine and medical practice, but most of the nurses were English nurses, and the English nurses had a totally different way of running, and one could not see eye to eye. And there was consternation. The nurses were threatening to pull out, and the doctors were threatening to pull out. But with Mary's ability of being able to speak French, English and Spanish, she was able to overcome those. And she was a huge organizer, so that's where her forte came. And she eventually, when she came into France, the area in Perpignan, that was the American Friends Society Committee, looked after that area in Perpignan. And to give an idea, this would be the equivalent in Munster, from Waterford up to Limerick, Kerry and Cork. That was the sort of area Mary was travelling. And she was travelling to schools all over those places, trying to provide something to the people. But not only have they 500,000 from Spain, they now had all the other people fleeing from the Nazis and heading south. So the place was just horrific. And a beautiful area, but there was a letter written by a teacher in a village school, the administrator in Perpignan. Of the 60 pupils, at least a dozen are almost entirely without food. They don't go home at lunchtime because there's no food in the house. For breakfast, they have coffee without eating a morsel of bread, and to soak it in. And the teacher said, for God's sake, will you help us? The problem, of course, passed to Mary, and the school received regular midday meals for the children, and Mary comes herself bringing those little extras. See what one child writes to her, dear Mademoiselle. The problem, of course, sorry. Thank you for all you do for us. Francine was 9 years of age. Another child sent her the picture that she made in 1942. Rivesaltes was an accommodation centre, so-called. It was where the Spaniards, a lot of them were put from the beaches, and it had been an army camp, but the army refused to live there because the conditions were so horrific. In the winter there was no heat, it was freezing cold, and tremendous winds coming from the south. In the summer it was baking hot, like an oven. So what did they do? They shoved all the poor unfortunate refugees from Spain in there. But then as they started coming from the rest of Europe, and when the French and Vichy government, people may realise that there was the so-called free zone on the southern part of France. The northern part of France was known as occupied France, occupied by the Nazis and the Germans. But the Vichy government were meant to run the south part of the island. But they were complicit with the Nazis in rounding up every Jew they could find, or any undesirable. There weren't only Jews, but mostly they were Jews. And they started bringing them to this accommodation centre. The wind is absolutely terrible there. And that was the condition. They were trying to shelter, waiting patiently for food. This is the supplementary food for the children. It was mostly rice, and it was only for the under 14s. Teenagers and adults had to suffer on the camp rations, which were less than 1,000 calories a day. There was plenty of sun and all the wind. The barracks were unheated and ridden with a vermin. The toilet facilities were horrific. Mary visited the camp. Mary visited the camp almost daily, and she brought words of comfort to the adults and treats for the children. So that's the Rivesaltes camp today. It's mostly a wind farm, and there was very little left of it. And Mary died in 2002, and around 2006 they were going to demolish it and level what was the former concentration camp. And there was local objections that said it was part of the French history and people should remember, you know, just how bad things were there. So it was actually saved from total demolition. Things have changed in nearly 80 years. Many of the concrete blocks are still there. Some of the camp area has become a wind farm. In the foreground you can see the construction of a memorial museum. And if you lift your eyes away from the desolate landscape, you can see the beauty of the mountains. And they're sacred mountains to the Spaniards of Catalonia. One solution to the problem undernourished and sickly children in Refugee was to remove them from the camp for a temporary holiday. And Mary organised colonies, and she took a great deal of organisation, finding, negotiating, renting, adapting, staffing, and running each centre by the sea or the mountains were good venues. Here the children could have peaceful nights away from the rats and the bugs and the awful cold and the awful heat, and they would be fed properly, and they could enjoy fun and games and explore the grounds, even go outside the colonies for sea bathing or on the mountain air. And in due course, when necessary, they could be hidden, but that's another story. This is the meal time at Refugee. And just compare that with the colony that she organised, meal time for the children in one of these camps that she took the children out to. And they were, you know, quite substantial places. This was a Villa San Christopher at Cabinet Plage, near Perpignan. Mary discovered this empty house and negotiated a rent for herself. And it was staffed and run by the American Mennonites. The Mennonites were another charitable organisation that were helping. So that's some of the children in another camp. And see how many children were there. Up the mountains, we found an empty hotel. And of course, the parents had to agree to sign the necessary papers, and the camp authorities had to agree too. But in 1942, there was a sinister change at Refugee camp. There was a roundup of the Jews throughout the south, and they were all placed in one section of Refugee, and it was rumoured to be the Jews of the north. They were to be put on trains bound for unknown destinations. Mary and the others, aid workers, swung into action immediately, and the children were removed from the camp, sometimes legally, but often illegal. So they had to try and get permission, and there was the children under 4 they would allow out, maybe not some of the older ones. So they used to forge documents saying the children were younger than they were, and Mary had the advantage of the use of a car, because her future husband was a forester, and he had some authority to get a large vehicle and petrol at the time. And Mary had an office in Refugee, and she used to sneak the children out in the boot of the car to take them out. A huge personal risk. Anyway, that's some of the Jews waiting, and you can imagine the horror of it. First of all, obviously, the people in Refugee didn't want to be apart from their children. But when word got back, they weren't going to holiday camps in Eastern Europe, and they knew what the fate awaited them. So they were pleading with Mary, take my children, please. So she had a huge problem in trying to feed without getting into trouble. And the children will be mixed with Spanish children in the colonies, and some would have to be moved to make room for newcomers. There was a great deal of work to be done, much of it was done in secret. There was also a Swiss maternity lady, Elizabeth Evenstein, and in November 1942, Germany now occupied the whole of France, and within weeks Mary was arrested. Now, when the Germans moved to the rest of France down to the south, all the English nurses or British nurses who were helping out had to flee. Mary was left virtually on her own, and she ended up being arrested on suspicion of helping people to escape, and she was brought to a Gestapo prison in near Perpignan, and subsequently she was taken to Paris and Friends prison, and that was her home for 6 months. And many people, most people who went there didn't return. There was another transit camp to go to Auschwitz and the like. And nobody knew where she went. They actually misspelled her name, so nobody could find where she disappeared. So it was some time before she could actually find out what had happened to her. And her brother, John, who was the owner and managing director of Waters Munster Glass at the time, he went out to Paris to try and get her released without success. And her mother hadn't been told that Mary was now in a Gestapo prison. But when she did find out, she got on to the Irish government. So Mary claimed her Irish neutrality and said she had no business being in Ireland was neutral, and with the help of the Irish Department of Foreign Affairs, after 6 months she got out, and she went back to Perpignan. And what did she do? Exactly what she'd been doing all before that. And she got a check eventually from the French government, and the check came to say sorry. 24 francs, about €5. So that was never cashed in. She was also offered the Legion d'Honneur, which is one of the highest awards that France would give to people who done heroic work during the war. But Mary turned it down. She said she didn't want a single award. She said it was all the people, it wasn't just her, so she wouldn't accept it on her own unless it was given to all the people. So before the war ended, she had a visit from another elderly lady as a young nurse from Switzerland who'd done wonderful work with the children of East South and presented Mary with a painting of the camp done by a former inmate. So this is the last picture we see of Mary. Remember the patriots, forgotten those who risked to care. And when our name the work in the region of France must have saved countless children from death, from hunger and disease, and all this was forgotten. So in 2014, Mary was recognised by Yad Vashem as righteous among nations. By this time, Mary and her work had been totally forgotten here in Ireland, if indeed it had ever been known at all. And this is the ceremony with her grandchildren. Behind on the right is Patrick, Mary son, and Carolyn on the left is her daughter, and 3 grandchildren. So maybe she should have got a Peace Prize, and maybe not. But what has happened is that in Cork, as you know, she was greatly honoured this year by a naming of a wonderful bridge in Cork in her name, which the family are all extremely proud of. And that was an interesting concept, in that it was the first time ever a public building in Cork was named by public vote, not by private vote, or not by the city councillors. And they put it out in public and asked people to vote or give it in names. There were 92 names, and some of them were quite extraordinary. That came down to 35, and eventually came down to 5, and Mary was joined with a Debarra who had been one of the fighters in 1916, and they were joined, and eventually it came down to the councillors, and there were 32 councillors to vote, and I'm proud to say that 19 voted in favour of Mary and 12 in favour of Debarra, so that's how she got her name on the bridge. And there's another little addition to that. When the bridge was named, people said to me, why should Mary Elmes, who was Mary Elmes? You know, why should a bridge be named after her? It's a fair point. Everybody knows who Brian Baru was and who Christy Ring was and Parnell and Nan O'Neill. So I suggested to the City Council that they put up some short description of what Mary did in her life, so they kindly agreed to do that. And I also got an approach from a lady called Claire Rosa, who was the last of the Orthodox Jews in Cork. That was Fred Rosa, was her father, who ran Marcus Picture Training for years. There was Max Elliott, and there was Gerald Goldberg, some of the prominent Jewish people in Cork. And Claire came and said, I would like to do something for Mary, seeing what she did for the Jews. So she said she wanted to sponsor the reception after the opening of the bridge. So I passed it on to the corporation and heard nothing for a while. And eventually I said, could I come back and tell Claire were they going to accept it? And said, no, we're not going to do that. But what we'd like to do is to put up the plaque, if she'd like to sponsor the plaque, and then there would be a permanent reminder to the people in Cork that there was such a thing as a Cork Hebrew congregation, was the correct terminology. So that was all done, and Claire pulled back the ribbon on the bridge, which was very proud. So that was the conclusion of that. So that more or less finishes what I'm doing from time. But I'd just like to fill you in on another peculiar little thing about this. Paddy Buckland, the fellow who wrote the first book and had also discovered and broke the story in Ireland, he approached RTE and said, would you like to do a documentary? This is an amazing story, like an Irish Oscar Schindler. And RTE said yes, and TG Catter said, yeah, we'll definitely sponsor it. So Paddy went off and he got a company called Midas Productions, who were a film production company in Baggot Street, to agree to do it. So then they headed off to France, and they went down to visit Patrick and Caroline, Mary's son and daughter, and said, can you tell us what your mother did during the war? They said, we don't know. What did you do? Never spoke about it. So they said, surely there must be something or somebody. He said, no, there was nothing. She never spoke about it. And he said, never. And they said, oh yeah, I remember. About 10 years ago, there was a film crew came to interview her. Oh yeah. And where were they from? Mexico. Mexico? Yeah. So Paddy gets on to Mexico Film Board, and he said, could you tell me about somebody who came to Europe about 10 years ago to interview Mary Elmes about rescuing Jews from Auschwitz? And they said to Paddy, are you a member of the Mexico Film Board? No, I'm not. But we can't give you any information. So Paddy goes off to Hollywood, and you get somebody in Hollywood. So they get on, and eventually they agree to give him information. So Paddy, like himself, he doesn't speak any Spanish. And the only Spanish speaking person he knew was the waiter down at the local pub in Belvedere. So he goes into the pub, and he says to the fellow, "Will you meet the Mexico Film Board?" So they eventually found a fellow called Pedro Gomez made the documentaries. So Paddy down at the pub, he gets through Pedro Gomez. Pedro Gomez, yeah? Do you make documentaries? See? And did you come to Europe about 10 years ago to interview Mary Elmes? Europe, says Pedro. I was never out of Mexico in my life. So discovered it was the wrong Pedro Gomez. So it's like Paddy Murphy in Cork. There's dozens of Pedro Gomez all over Mexico. So he eventually traces down another man down to the pub again, as Paddy's want. Brings him up. "Are you Pedro Gomez?" "See," he said. "And did you come to Europe 10 years ago?" "Yes," he said. "And what did you do with the documentary?" "I feel very bad about it," he said. "I was meant to send it on to his son and daughter, but I never did anything about it." "Oh yeah. And have you got it now?" "I'll have to go look," he said. "Come back to me." So Paddy comes back again, another few pints, and says to Pedro said, "I have good news and bad news." He said, "The good news is I found the documentary. The bad news is that the part of the interview with Mary Elmes was edited out of it." And he said, "What do you mean edited out of it?" He said, "It was cut out of it." "And where is it now?" "I don't know," he said. "She must know." "I don't know where it is." So Paddy persisted, "You have to find it. We're meant to do a documentary for TV Barra, and that's the only source we ever had of anybody talking to Mary about what she did. You must find it." And he said, "I couldn't." So eventually Paddy stuck with him, and he said, "Oh, in the summer we have students coming into work in the Mexico Film Board. We'll give them a project to see if they can go and find it." So off they went. But then 2 months later, rings up and said, "We found it. It's almost an hour long, and most of it is in English." So that was the basis of the documentary, which was shown on TGR twice last year and earlier this year. So, and that's an amazing story, but it's an easy maze. So I can finish there. I do have the documentary, but I think we've run out of time. So some other time, if anybody is interested,
we might get you back again on the night. That would you? Would that be okay?
no.